Hi Year 9. So we have finished the Year 9 physics course now, but we still have a decent number of lessons left. So what I thought we could do was take something that we learnt in Year 8 physics, but go a little bit deeper into it. So if you remember, in Year 8 we started off the year learning about all the different energy types. Well, I want us to focus in on kinetic energy for the next little while. Now, there's a few different things that we need to make sure that we know about it, and I am asking you to write these down, and I'll be asking you to submit a picture of your notes. So what I'm writing down on my page here, that's what you need to be writing down on your page. Okay, so kinetic energy, if you can remember, kinetic energy is the energy that something has because it is moving. So let's get a definition for that written in here. Okay, so what is kinetic energy? It's the energy an object has because of its movement. So if something is staying completely still, then we would say it has zero kinetic energy. Now the next thing I need us to think about is, what does kinetic energy actually depend on? Well, one of the things is really obvious. So if it is the energy something has because it is moving, then it makes sense that the faster something is moving, the more kinetic energy it's going to have. So one thing that it depends on is the object's speed. Okay, so make sure you write that in. But the other thing, I don't know if it is quite as obvious, the other thing that it depends on is the object's mass, because if you we'll talk about a couple of different comparisons here, but if you think about, if you had two objects, so I have two objects here, if they're both traveling at the same speed, they're going to contain the same amount of energy. But if one of the objects is double the mass of the other one, then, and it's going at the same speed, it's going to contain much more energy because it has a much bigger mass. So kinetic energy doesn't just depend on an object's speed, it depends on its mass as well. So let's write that in. I think it's a little bit more obvious if you think about, say, a car and a truck. So if we have a car travelling along the road at 50 miles per hour and a truck travelling along the road at 50 miles per hour, well, if they both crash into something, the truck is going to do much more damage than the car, even though they're both travelling at the same speed. And it's because of that bigger mass that it's going to do much more damage. There's much more energy involved there because of its higher mass, right? Now, the next thing we need to be able to do is to calculate a value for kinetic energy. So there is an equation. Now, so far in physics, the equations that we have done have been relatively straightforward. They've all only had 3 terms in them, and we've been able to use the triangle to rearrange them. But do you know how all year I've been emphasizing using our algebra skills to rearrange our equations? That's going to come in handy here. Okay, so the equation for calculating kinetic energy, I'm going to show you how we write it, and then I'm going to show you what all the different letters stand for. So kinetic energy, we tend to write KE for that, is equal to a half multiplied by the mass of the object multiplied by its speed squared, and we write a V for that. Now it is important that you know that it is just the V that is squared there. It's not this half or the M, it's just the V. Okay, so let's write down what all the letters stand for as well. So kinetic energy, or KE, is the kinetic energy. A half is just a half, we don't need to list what it is. M is the mass, and V is the object's speed. Now, as always in physics, the units here are so important. So all energies are measured in joules. That would have been mentioned briefly in Year 8, but you probably don't quite remember that. So kinetic energy is measured in joules, and whenever we would be writing that, we would just write a capital J. So if something is 8 joules, we would write 8 and then a capital J. The mass always has to be in kilograms. and we write kg, small k and small g. And then the speed has to be in meters per second. Okay? So that is the key information that we need to know about kinetic energy at this stage. What we're going to look at now is applying this equation to a few different questions. Okay? So write down this example. You'll need to pause the video to write it down, and then we'll work through the solution together. Okay, now as we have been doing all year, whenever we start a calculation in physics, we always start by listing the information in the question. Okay, now if we read through this, a car of mass 500 kilograms, mass, so the mass is 500 kilograms, is traveling at 30 meters per second. Now nowhere there is the word speed used, but we need to be able to recognize values from their units. So the the meters per second tells us that it's a speed. So remember in this equation we use V for speed. So V is 30 meters per second. And then always list down what the question is actually asking you for as well, because it helps you recognize what equation it is that you need to use. So calculate the kinetic energy. So first stage, if you're working out, write out the equation. Kinetic energy equals a half multiplied by the mass multiplied by the speed squared. We all know the next stage then is to fill in our quantities. So kinetic energy, we don't know it, that's what we're trying to figure out. So Ke equals a half multiplied by m, and if we look over here, we've already picked out what m is from the question. So 500 multiplied by V, which we've said over here is 30, and that is being squared. So just type this into your calculator and check that you get the same answer that I get. Okay, so I got 225,000. And don't forget, we always have to put our unit on our answers. So remember, energy is measured in joules. So we put the capital J there for that. And that's that one done. Let's do one more. Okay, so write down this example. A communication satellite of mass 120 kilograms orbits the Earth at a speed of 3,000 meters per second. Calculate its kinetic energy. So make sure you write out the question. And now we will write out our solution. So same as last time, we need to make sure we list the information that the question gives us. So 120 kilograms, that's the mass, at a speed of 3,000 meters per second. So speed is 3,000 meters per second. Calculate the kinetic energy. Okay, so remember it's this stuff here is where the marks start. So kinetic energy equals a half multiplied by the mass multiplied by the speed squared. Then we fill in our values. Half multiplied by mass is 120 multiplied by the speed squared, and the speed here is 3,000. Now again, type that into your calculator and check that you get the same number that I get. So I got 540 million there. And don't forget to put your unit on your answer. Now, I know I have said this to you a million times already, but in questions like this there would be 4 marks. So there's 1 mark for writing out the equation, there's 1 mark for correctly substituting in your answers, or not your answers, the values, and there's 1 mark for the numerical answer and 1 mark for the unit. So you can see why we are so fussy about getting you to set your work out properly, because it's what gets you the marks. Okay, so let's have a little look at what all we need to know. So we need to know the definition for kinetic energy. So it's the energy an object has because it's moving or because of its movement. We need to know that it depends on both the object's speed and its mass. So we need to know that increasing something's mass is going to increase its kinetic energy, and increasing the speed is going to increase its kinetic energy. We need to know this equation off by heart, and we need to know what the letters stand for, obviously, otherwise the equation is useless. But we also need to know what units everything is measured in. Yeah? Now, also very important that you set your working out exactly like I have. So there's going to be a worksheet of questions for you to do on this, and for every single question you need to be listing the information that the question gives you and then setting out your working exactly like this. Okay? Don't forget to ask if you need any help.